Hi, Darren. So thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us. Um, we're here today to talk a little bit about health and safety in construction.
Hmm.
From the point of view of the person on the street, building sites appear to be a very dangerous place. What sort of health and safety issues would any visitor need to be aware of?
Yes, you're quite correct. With construction, it's one of the industries that does unfortunately have the most accidents. And of course, new people onto sites are people that are not very experienced, so they're more at risk in terms of safety. So there's something called the CDM regs, Construction Design Management Regulations 2015, and that actually requires everybody that goes onto site to have an induction, which means that you would have an individual conversation, a training session based on the hazards that are on that site. So that means that you'd be made aware of things like electricity.
Right, yeah.
Maybe there's overhead cables.
Yeah.
Excavations, maybe there's holes that you could fall into, perhaps. And maybe there's large vehicles on the site as well. That is something that is quite a considerable hazard, really, especially if you don't really have the experience and the training.
I suppose also you're going to be working at height on some occasions with scaffolding and things like that.
Yes, of course, that's true. Very common for people to fall from height. Not just new workers, but experienced workers as well. It does quite often happen, and obviously it can be very, very dangerous and fatal.
Fatal, yeah.
Falling from height really is something that you want to avoid
Definitely.
at all costs.
Absolutely.
Obviously, and the training for things like that is all done within the induction of a site, and it would be something that would be done regularly. You would get an induction. Each time you change site or move to a different area of the site, you would get a new induction, and that would inform you of the risk that you take. So we have something called a risk assessment for each task that you do. You get that task gets assessed on what the hazards are, what are the chances of you actually getting harmed as well, who could be harmed, how you could be harmed, and the severity of.
And who would carry out that risk assessment?
Well, the risk assessments aren't carried out by new workers, they're carried out by competent, experienced people. So people who are probably in a supervisionary role, and people who would have that full range of knowledge and understanding of, and they've been there and done the tasks themselves, so they understand it. Anybody can do a risk assessment because in theory, a risk assessment is something we do all the time.
Right.
When we cross the road.
Yes, of course.
Or when we make a hot drink and we're boiling hot water, we would make a risk assessment based on our personal experiences. But of course, if you don't have those experiences firsthand,
it's very difficult to assess the risk.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all part of the training, really, and the induction process.
We hear an awful lot about PPE in regards to health and safety. Could you take us through what's meant by this, particularly with regard to the construction industry?
Yes, of course. PPE is something that is very personal to you. It's personal. So some safety devices help to protect everyone. For example, handrails on a scaffold, that protects everybody.
Yeah.
But personal protective equipment is simply just on your person. So I have some bits here which
brilliant.
I can pull in. So, for example, this is just a paper-based mask, dust mask. Don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Quite uncomfortable to wear because you've got these elastic straps.
Right.
And it makes it difficult to breathe, although there is a little filter at the side.
Yes.
Actually, it makes working, especially in hot weather, quite difficult. And it stops the dust. It stops you breathing in the dust. However, the best way to manage dust is to not make dust in the first place.
Right, yes.
So PPE is what we call a last resort. So it's uncomfortable to wear, it's not very pleasant, and it costs money to buy and use, and a mask like this might last a few hours and then you throw it away and you get another one. So there's also a cost to it. So what we do for example, in the case of dust, to avoid the dust in the first place, we use water suppression systems. And that means really if it comes to the requirement to cut something, we would spray water on the cutting wheel or the disc or the blade, and that reduces the the need for PPE because it takes away the dust element.
Absolutely.
As an example.
That makes sense. And as far as other items of PPE that people might wear, I suppose boots are another consideration.
Boots are a necessary thing for everybody. Even a visitor on site will have boots on. And you just get used to wearing them, and they're something that everybody will wear. But occasionally, and when I go onto sites, I do occasionally see somebody without boots, and it's a rare occurrence, but it does happen.
Yeah.
So definitely boots, definitely something high visibility like this, and also with different tasks, you will use different items of PPE. So if there's some chance of wind blowing dust into your eyes, then you would use goggles. These are impact goggles,
right.
So they will withstand a certain amount of impact.
So if a piece of gravel, for example, broke away from some concrete that you were demolishing,
absolutely.
That would stop it damaging your eyes.
Particularly with power tools. If there's power tools involved, power tools normally have rotating blades, and the blades fling up pieces that you don't want to come into your eyes. Certainly, you can also get sunglasses that are protective as well. And it's the impact resistance that we're really looking for with goggles.
Yeah, no, that makes an awful lot of sense.
The other thing that I have here, I wanted to get hard hat, but I couldn't get my hands on one. But unfortunately, as I was explaining earlier, hard hats have a date stamp on them. And that means that they're only usable for 2 or 3 years.
Golly.
And when you look at the date stamp, it may have expired, and then you just throw it away. So we did have a whole box of hard hats, and I wanted to show you one. But it may have been that the date has expired on them, and they indeed have actually been thrown away because they're useless, really, apart from perhaps they'd be okay on a video, but they would be no good on site because the plastic over time weakens.
Because of the sunlight. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
And hot and cold temperatures, different uses. So I do have some, what I call hearing goggles, which is just my little joke, really. Earmuffs.
Earmuffs, yeah.
And these are very good quality earmuffs. Quite often people will use small earplugs, like a little bit of foam that they will roll up and put in their ear, which is fine. But again, it depends on how loud the machinery is and the area that you work in.
I suppose something like this would protect you against long-term risk for something like tinnitus.
Absolutely. Some things like dust and noise affect you over a long period of time. So, of course, a fall from height is an instant accident, but a lot of hazards are built up over time. So it's absolutely fine to work near noisy machinery for a few days, a few weeks, but over a career, that is really damaging to your hearing.
Absolutely. Now, you work in a college. So anybody who's going to enter the construction industry, they're going to need some qualifications. To what extent is health and safety something that forms part of the modules that they're going to be doing?
Yeah, well, every qualification has built into it, embedded into it, health and safety, of course. But most people that work on construction sites will also go for what we call CSCS training and a test. And that gives you a plastic ID card, which gets you onto sites in terms of identifying who you are, what your level of experience is, and what your qualifications are, and really how much of a risk you are as well. So a novice or a trainee might get a card that will last for 6 months or 12 months. And during that time, you would then take a health and safety test, which covers all of the general aspects of first aid and how to deal with electricity, how to deal with emergencies, accidents.
So actually gaining those qualifications in health and safety also means you're more likely to be employed. You're getting...
Absolutely. You really can't get onto major sites. There's 10 main house builders in the UK, and they all require CSCS cards. And to get the card, you have to have taken the test. I think it's just a minimum, really. It's just the basic bare minimum. Just a general knowledge of what could go wrong. And then, of course, if you are on site, there's probably some sort of qualification, like a trade, that's involved as well. So, for example, if you are learning to be a carpenter or a plumber or a bricklayer, you really need to develop that knowledge of health and safety further.
Yeah. So, if, for example, a learner came here to do a carpentry course, they'd also focus on the particular aspects of health and safety, to dealing with sharp tools and that type
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah, definitely, and lifting and carrying and moving things, because new people on sites tend to be the ones that are asked to move. Can you just move that timber? Can you just move these sheets of plywood?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, plasterboard, and moving carefully is very important as well. We call that manual handling. So, and I think from when I started on construction sites, some of the first jobs I had to do was carry sheets of plasterboard up flights of stairs, and the guy I worked with was taller than me, was stronger than me, and moving materials around is quite often dependent on your own personal physical abilities as well.
Yes.
And I think over the years we've looked at how do we reduce the load, how do we make bags of plaster, bags of cement and sand a little bit lighter and easier to carry and move. So,
Makes sense. You don't want people to develop long-term injuries, particularly to their backs.
that's right, yeah. And manual handling involves pushing, pulling, or any sort of movement, repetitive movement, really. So it doesn't really even mean that you have to be lifting something heavy to hurt yourself.
No, absolutely. Darren, thank you so much
welcome.
for talking to us today. It's been very
You're
interesting.
welcome. No problem at all. Thank you.